Almost 70 years ago, these men were boys just out of school.
In one fell swoop, you ceased being a boy and you became a man.
So young to be caught up in the world's darkest hour, the last year of the Second World War. Now in old age, these precious few survivors are all around us, hidden in plain view. This is the last chance to hear what really happened firsthand.
German bodies, Canadian bodies, British bodies. The smell, the stench. That's war. That's war.
From the landings on the D-Day beaches to fighting in the Battle of the Bulge in a freezing winter, and storming through Europe uncovering the true horrors of Nazi Germany.
How can human people do that to other human people? How can they do it?
It's their story in their words, not the one written by generals and historians.
After all these years, still needs to metal.
Where there's original film, we'll see where they fought. Where archive doesn't exist, we'll use real bombs and weapons to illustrate what our veterans went through. This is the story of the final year of World War II in Europe, as told by the last war heroes. In June 1944, hundreds of thousands of young men gathered on the south coast of England, ready for war.
Ships everywhere. Ships behind us, at the sides of us, in front of us. And I'd never seen so many ships. I never knew we had so many ships. There were ships of every size. I was just amazed. And I stood there for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and an officer came up and spoke to me. And I said, I'm just looking at the ships. And he said, well, you better get your kit ready. We're going in shortly.
It was as if a giant had pulled ropes with them all attached. It was a fantastic sight.
And I'm looking at the white cliffs, and I'm saying to myself, God, I hope someday I'm able to get back here again. I was happy, I felt secure. I felt that, you know, God was going to be with me, and that I was going to make it.
Everybody around you is scared, but you don't want to act scared in front of your buddies. You know, this stuff, apple pie and ice cream and democracy, that's crock of bull. We infantry guys, you were fighting for your buddy. The guy on the right and the left of you. That's you didn't want to let them down. That's what it was all about. And you really didn't think you were going to get hit. Never dawned on me that I'd get hit.
This was the real thing, and it was a feeling inside each guy, I imagine, that how am I going to act under fire? I had never killed anybody. I never had a gun when I was a child. I never went hunting like the Southerners in my outfit. So I didn't know whether I could kill a man. I made up my mind that I wasn't coming back.
Just after midnight, D-Day, June the 6th, 1944. These men and thousands more British, Americans and Canadians were given their orders. 5 beaches, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword, had to be captured by nightfall. Next, the generals expected them to seize Caen, 12 miles inland. They would be up against a massive evil force, the formidable and determined German army intent on forcing them back into the sea. Almost 70 years on, the survivors all have the same vivid memory of the crossing to France.
The weather was rotten, it was windy, and our little landing craft assault was just like a cork bobbing all over the place. And I'd picked up a bully beef sandwich, and all of a sudden I had a tap on my shoulder. Hutch was there, and he was green and sick. And my jocks were the same color. He looked at me and he said, "Sir, turf that flippin' sandwich, will you?"
I was sick continuously all the way over until I could be sick no more. Until we got the order, start engines, unshackle the tanks, my seasickness disappeared.
I mean, you could hear a pin drop. Honestly, there was, because everybody knew. So there was damn little conversation. But some of the guys, honestly, they had premonitions. Thank God I didn't have a premonition. They knew they were going. They knew they weren't going to make it.
Before the troops landed, the Allied plan was to soften up the German defences with an aerial and then naval bombardment. A 19-year-old medical student from New York, Hal Baumgarten, was huddled inside a ship. He remembers hearing it start.
A tremendous amount of noise. And of course, the English Channel was getting rougher each time because the ships, when they fired those guns, would cause the waves to occur.
We got 16-inch guns that were slinging shells out this size, and they went overhead like an express train. It sounded just like a train going over your head.
We were a 6-inch gun cruiser, which meant we could get quite relatively close to the shore, and our target was the gun emplacements on the shore. And what happened is one of our shells went through the embouchure, didn't hit the concrete, went right inside. And it exploded. It blew that whole turret into pieces no bigger than a motor car. And they're still there amongst the grass. And that's why they called it the luckiest shot, but we always said it was the most accurate.
Approaching Juno Beach, 18-year-old George Dangerfield remembers the enemy firing the first shots back at the Allied invasion force.
I mean, as we went into the beach, we had the enemy artillery firing at us, and it was going over our heads. The noise was just horrendous. It was hell for everybody. It was something that none of us had ever been trained to experience. Something that you quickly accepted because you had a job to do.
20-year-old Donald McCarthy was from Boston, USA. He remembers clearly when he first saw the coast of Normandy.
I'm saying, my God, there's France. Wow, we're going to be there. We're going to go in. All of a sudden, the rockets started going off, and the battleship started bombing, and I'm saying, my God, what is going on? This is incredible, guys. You know, well, I hope to God I live long enough to remember it so I can tell somebody about it. It was amazing. There was a cacophony of sound that I'll never forget. I could feel it, every sound of it right now as I'm talking to you.
It was just a mess. Smoke, dirt, noise, more noise than you can imagine. Even stories that our father told us about the First World War, I don't think compared with the noise that we went into.
The D-Day invasion plan was far from perfect, and the weather was atrocious. For the men at sea, it was quite unlike anything they'd ever experienced before. First, they had to disembark from larger ships into tiny, vulnerable landing craft. This is when Bill Ryan got a taste of the carnage to come.
As we're circling, all 4 of our boats was knocked off by 88s and by mines. My boat was hit, was blown up in the air. All I remember is hitting my head against the bulkhead. But it hit us on the right-hand side, and the boat went over this way. So my head, you know, went this way. And that's when I cracked my skull, and I had a big shell fragment in my shoulder.
Shells and bullets rained down on the men from above. Beneath the choppy sea, the Germans had laid underwater mines. Like a giant swimming pool, lanes were marked in the sea, where they'd been cleared for the landing craft to get through. So they hoped.
So there was a horrible grating sound from the bottom, and then you could realise that it hit something, and then the front went up, but the forward part of it was up. And you just waited and I hope there's not a mine on this one.
A 20-year-old farm boy from Ontario, Canada, Alex Adair was one of thousands heading towards Juno Beach.
My craft hit an obstacle out in the water. And it blew the whole front of the landing craft up in the air. There was nothing but water pouring in, and guys up in the front, they were all done for. That was it for them. They were game over.
Hal Baumgarten's closest comrades suffered the same fate as they approached Omaha Beach.
As my little boat came in, the boat on my left from Company B hit a mine and blew up, and we were showered with wood, metal, and body parts, and blood. So that was my welcome to France. After I saw my best buddy dead, and I saw all these fellas that I knew getting killed, you get sort of almost like a psychosis. You want to kill.
As the landing craft closed in on the beaches, they dropped their ramps, revealing to the men the battlefield ahead.
the ramp went down, it almost fell on a soldier, a dead soldier. I noticed there was something was wrong, didn't look natural, and it just dawned on me that he had no head. He only had a piece of bone sticking up back there.
With the ramps down, the men were an easy target for the Germans. Many were cut down before they made it to shore. Others tried desperately to swim, weighed down by their kit.
These guys stepped off the ramp, they went straight down to the bottom, and most of them drowned.
Like Hal Baumgarten, Donald McCarthy was approaching Omaha Beach, getting ready to jump into the water.
This is my helmet. It's something I have to have with me all the time. My chin strap was on when I went over the side of the boat. And when I went in head first, the air that had accumulated in my helmet pulled me back to the surface. And that's when I, hey, I'm up. I got my CO belt, I got rid of everything. All I got on is my little 29th Division jacket, that's it. The combat jacket is gone, the rifle is gone, my camera is gone. I'm saying, son of a gun, my dad will kill me because I lost the camera.
Over on Gold Beach, the British Royal Marine Commandos were blown 12 miles off course by the bad weather. Hundreds of men were desperately trying to swim to the shore.
We all had Mae West. You know what a Mae West is? A Mae West is an inflatable chess piece. Mae West is she was a famous actress at that time, fairly well endowed with feminine appurtenances. So when you were swimming with it, it kept you up out of the water. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got ashore, because I'm not an awfully good swimmer. When I jumped into the sea, I had a huge rucksack of medical equipment. So it floated, and I swam pushing it. And then when I got about halfway in, bubbles were coming out of it, and to my horror, it sank into water well out of my depth. So I lost all my medical equipment.
Now, there's a kid next to me, and I thought he had just come up with me, but I later found out that he had drowned. But I was talking to him as close as I am to you. I'm talking to him in the water. I'm saying, come on, swim, swim, swim. And he's not saying anything to me. And I grabbed him on the shoulder, and I pulled him along with me. Initially, I was pulling him because I was using him as a safety net. I wasn't doing it out of any favor for him. I was doing it out of favor for me. This bothered the hell out of me for a long years, 25 years. It bothered me. That's been the main part of my whole life. That guilt, because they were the heroes. We were the survivors.
Facing a hail of bullets and mortars, Donald McCarthy remembers almost losing hope.
And the smoke came over. That was the miracle. You know, I think God had a plan for me.
Using the smoke as cover, Don and the rest of his unit on Omaha raced up the beach. Although many men were finally landing on their beaches, progress was slow on Omaha. With hundreds already dead, the next waves were sent in with no idea of the bloodbath waiting for them. A 24-year-old from Liverpool, Jim Kelly, landed on Sword Beach.
In our group, there would be about 7 of us. Within 6 paces of getting onto the sand, there was only me standing up. The others were all down, and I got told to get off the beach.
In the chaos of war, Jim remembers a bizarre, surreal image.
There was a man standing there in this full naval uniform, dead smart, and he was directing traffic off the beach. Come on, off the beach. Wouldn't let anybody stop. Get off. Get off.
Also coming ashore on Sword Beach was signalman Ken Sturdy.
I can remember a beachmaster. He was a Navy officer, I think, and he had, of all things, a bulldog on a lead, which made me think of Churchill, of course. And he was yelling, like, get off the beach. His instructions, of course, as beachmaster was to clear that beach and get people over the seawall because the Germans had the range of the beach.
The sands that lay ahead were also deadly. They were riddled with mines.
A man came by me. I don't know who he was, what outfit he was with. He could have been an engineer on that beach, as far as I know, but a mine that had been hung on a fence post went off just as he's alongside of it, and it blew the man in half.
Newly trained sick berth attendant George Dangerfield will never forget the stretcher bearers bringing in the first casualties. The numbers were overwhelming.
It was a case of treating the most severe first if you could. I will remember one army major that we brought back to England. To look at him as he was standing up, you wouldn't think that there was a thing wrong with him. But he walked over an anti-personnel mine, and from the top of his head to his heels, he was actually shredded. The whole of his back and his arms, legs were completely shredded.
Just off Juno Beach, George patched up the wounded as best he could. Over on Omaha, and in the thick of battle, was Hal Baumgarten.
I saw things on that beach that no 19-year-old should ever have to see. I saw men with their innards hanging out, screaming, mom, mother, medic. It was horrible sights. Body parts laying on that beach, legs, arms, heads. But we kept going.
The Allies had begun to land on the beaches of Normandy, and the Nazi forces of Germany were inflicting heavy casualties on them. Ahead of the invasion, the generals had an extraordinary plan they hoped would help the soldiers advance up the beaches. The Air Force would fly over and bomb them.
The idea was the Air Force was supposed to bomb the beach so we'd have foxholes to get into. Well, they were late assembling over England. And by the time they come in, the landing craft were coming in. So they didn't want to drop their bombs for fear of hitting us, so they dropped their bombs 3 miles inland, And I don't mind saying the great Air Force, Precision bombing in World War II, baloney. Baloney.
Donald MacArthur also felt let down, in his case by the US Navy.
This is the one thing that we were promised was that, don't worry, guys, the Navy will take care of you. They'll dig all kinds of holes for you. You won't have to worry. There'll be plenty of places to hide. Yeah, I'm saying to myself, doesn't look that way.
The men had to dig in, all the time being shelled and under machine gun fire.
There were three lads, they were digging a trench on the beach, and there was machine gun fire. One fellow was getting hit, and he was looking at his arm. That was getting chewed to bits.
Of all the men who survived the lottery of D-Day, Hal Baumgarten on Omaha Beach was one of the luckiest.
An 88mm shell landed in front of me. I got hit by a fragment of that 88, which hit me in this side of my face. My cheek, as described by an aid man later, was laying over my ear. The upper jaw was shot away on the left side, the maxilla. I had a hole in the roof of the mouth. I had teeth and gums laying on my tongue. Couldn't spit them out, couldn't swallow them.
Donald McCarthy was also on Omaha Beach. So far he'd been saved from drowning by his helmet and from a hail of bullets by his comrade's dead body.
Another shell burst, and both the medic and myself, he got caught in the back and I got caught in my left leg. And I'm down and I'm saying, hey, I got some problems too. And the two medics pulled me and pulled a kid that had been shot bad, pulled us up onto the berm so we're hidden.
Taking cover on an open beach wasn't easy. Thousands like Vincent Horton took advantage of whatever they found.
I was carrying the adjutant's map case and the mortars came over. And I dived into where a bomb or a shell had blown the sea wall down a bit and left a crater. I dived in there and my rifle cut my eye open right up at the top there, and the mortar, I felt some bits go in me. And I waited till it finished, then I dashed off and got up to where we had to rendezvous, and gave him back his map case, and he said, "Look at this." And there was a hole right up through it. Missed me, gone through the map case. But they dug the few pieces out of me, and patched my eye up, and we were off.
With only half a jaw and most of his teeth missing, Hal Baumgarten continued as if nothing had happened. Then he was hit again.
Just then a mortar shell went off, and I got 3 pieces of shrapnel into my helmet, into my scalp, and I reached in with 3 fingers, came out with blood. Blood came out over my ear and down the back of my neck.
Some men in Hal's unit with flamethrowers tried to take out the German pillboxes and bunkers. Hal watched in horror as the Germans quickly targeted them.
The flamethrowers were hit, their fuel tanks were hit. And the men were cremated. I could smell the flesh.
No amount of training could have prepared George Dangerfield for the horrifying injuries piling up before him.
We were trying to keep alive those people that had been brought to us who were wounded and injured. Shrapnel wounds could be very, very ugly. They could take a limb off or take masses of muscle tissue and things like that and leave great holes in the body. you had little time to worry about what else was happening around you.
One of the vivid memories I have is of seeing a Canadian soldier who'd been hit in the face and had most of his face blown away, and the Padre was comforting him. Padre was right up close, and the chap wanted a cigarette. There was nowhere to put it. I have since seen a photograph taken by a Canadian photographer who landed with them. Not only does it show the strong point that we were next to, but also some Canadian wounded, including one with a great big field dressing on his face. And I've wondered ever since if that's the chap I saw.
That day, the Allied generals had hoped to capture the city of Caen, 12 miles away, before nightfall. It was early afternoon. The men were struggling to gain even 100 yards of ground. Donald McCarthy was one of thousands lying injured on Omaha Beach. Despite his mortar shell wounds, he remembers watching chaos unfold before his very eyes.
And I watched the beach devastated. I watched the whole show. I saw an ME-109 fly over twice and strafe the beach. I saw kids getting killed, still coming in on the beach.
Against the odds, Bill Ryan made it to the top of Omaha Beach. He remembers turning back to look at the devastation behind him.
I wish I had had a camera or a tape recorder. I would have made a fortune, because here I'm on the very left flank coming in, looking down at Omaha Beach, at that chaos, that confusion, the whole thing. The only thing that saved us was this U.S. Navy destroyer, the USS Frankfurt, came in real close without running aground and started banging away at the hill. So he suppressed the fire up on the top of the hill. And that's what allowed us to get through the exit and get on up the hill.
Ahead of the troops lay yet another obstacle. For once, this was something the generals had equipped the men for.
Once you hit the hill, going up, there were barbed wire and minefields, and the engineers had to clear them with the Bangalore torpedoes.
Despite the losses and casualties, the remaining troops, safely through the barbed wire, were close to the German forces. Some were injured, but heroically kept going. Hal Baumgarten crawled off Omaha Beach, assuming he'd never survive the day. He'd lost half his jaw, most of his teeth were missing, and 3 bits of shrapnel were stuck in his head. It was a miracle he was still alive. Then more bad news.
While crawling, I must have set off this mine. It felt like a rock hitting my left foot. I looked down and I saw a clean hole through my left foot, through the legging. We wore leggings. So I was very good at bandaging. So I took the shoe off and like you would dump water out of a vase, I dumped the blood out of my shoe, took the sock off, put a beautiful bandage on, powder and beautiful bandage, but just then shells were coming in, so I pulled the shoe over the bandage and dove for the hedgerow.
Vast strongholds, an assortment of concrete pillboxes, radar stations and bunkers at the top of the beaches were the final but most impregnable defences the troops still had to face. Charles Scott Brown on Sword Beach knew exactly what to do.
So what you do is you keep moving, and then you try and get a section underneath, so that the gun is there, and you get the guy underneath here. And what you do is you take grenades and you throw them in the gun slot. So if it's a 3-second fuse, what you do is you let the handle go. You can see the smoke on it, and you go 1,000, 2,000, and you throw it in.
The power of a grenade remains a vivid memory for those that used them.
I looked inside, and there were 2 men in there, what was left of them. One of them wasn't anything left of him, but from his hips down, his legs were there, and the rest of his body was gone. It's and the other one was about the same way. And there were dead soldiers laying around that gun.
Once at the top of the beaches, the men realized that somehow they'd survived the bloodiest assault course of the war so far.
You say, well, thank God it's not me. I mean, as bad as I felt for those poor buggers, maybe I'm selfish, but I say, Jesus Christ, I made it.
One thing you can't show is the smell of warfare. It is the smell of death. It's just a thing that you can't convey. It's just an evil thing. Yeah.
In one fell swoop, you ceased being a boy and you became a man because you had to deal with man's problems. It was as quick as that. I mean, after all these years, still needs when they're talking.
The troops had spent the entire day battling to get off their beaches. As night fell, some were still bogged down in the dunes, others had ventured into Normandy, but none had achieved their target and reached the city of Caen. Just off Omaha Beach, with half a jaw, shrapnel in his head and a hole in his foot, Hal Baumgarten was about to be hit again.
Well, there was a German machine gun about 50 meters down the road and trained on that road, an MG-42. And everybody got ambushed there. And I came a little late and I was crouched over. So I got a bullet. It came through this piece of lip, took away this piece of lip, and took out my right upper jaw with more teeth and gums on my tongue. So there I fell on top of these guys who didn't matter anymore because they were just about gone.
For the first time on D-Day, Hal began to lose hope.
So I used up my last morphine, and the moon on D-Day was the brightest moon I've ever seen in my life. And I'm laying with 6 dead GIs in a ditch.
After he was injured on the same beach, Donald McCarthy had been taken to a field hospital.
And there's a ranger coming down, and he's got some Jerry's with him. And we're saying, my God, we got some prisoners. Wow, maybe this thing isn't as bad as we thought it was. And we looked at the Jerry prisoners, and they all looked like they were Chinese or Japanese. And we kind of, well, where did they come from? They were Ukrainians that had been taken by the Germans. They were Russian prisoners that they had mobilized. And these were kind of the frontline guys they used as buffers. And those were the first prisoners that were taken.
Hal Baumgarten was found, lying in a ditch with the 6 dead soldiers. At last he was in the care of the medics, heading back on a stretcher towards the beach for evacuation. He thought his ordeal was finally over.
German snipers were to my left up on the bluff, and they started firing at the wounded. They put a bullet through the red cross on the armband of the aid man. They shot me in the right knee, which wasn't a bad wound, believe it or not. But the next one was going through between the eyes. And just then, the destroyer McCook came offshore with the bottom scraping the bottom, and the gunnery officer became my friend in recent years. He wiped out the snipers with the 5-inch guns. Went right over my head. And you saw a puff of smoke coming off that bluff, and the snipers were wiped out. Exterminated. I like to use the word exterminated.
Suddenly, the noise of war was interrupted.
I could hear bagpipe playing, and I thought I was imagining it. Strange how the sound of a bagpipe carries above even this tremendous noise level. And it was years later I met Bill Millen, who was the Lord Lovett's piper, and told him that I could hear his pipes, you see. I said, we talked of armaments. I said, all I went ashore was with a pistol, you see. He said that my pipes were my weapon.
That was D-Day. The next day, men looked back at the beaches they'd secured, now laden with the dead, wounded and dying. They knew everything hadn't gone according to the general's plan. But the invasion of Europe had begun. George Dangerfield spent the next few months ferrying the wounded back across the Channel.
I just did what I was expected to do. It's something that life throws at you, and you try to carry on.
Vincent Horton, who'd survived the shrapnel through his map case, was later seriously wounded when he stepped on a landmine.
Oh, when I woke up and saw both legs off, I was devastated. But when I knew I was alive, I was happy. I knew then that there was no war for me. In other words, I'm all right now, Jack. That was it.
The invincible Hal Baumgarten, wounded 5 times on D-Day alone, was evacuated back to England. He never fought again.
Well, it gave me a greater feeling for life. In other words, I knew how short life was, and to live through something like that shows you that life is important. And each day, like I tell my wife, every day maybe 5 times a day, how much I love her, and my kids. All my kids say, when they talk to me, they say, I love you, and we say the same thing back. Because you never know when your time is going to be up.
The rest of the men, including the wounded, advanced into Normandy, leaving the beaches behind them.
You know what's happened in the previous action, and by God, you're worried about what's going to happen in the next one.
The Allies failed to capture Caen. The generals insisted it was still their objective. In the next chapter, our veterans would have to fight through the treacherous hedgerows of Normandy.
It was the worst country in the world to fight in.
Take on the seemingly indestructible German Tiger tank.
And then through the smoke in front, I suddenly saw this huge tank coming along. I gave the orders to the gunner to fire, to try and shoot the Tiger up. Bang!
Then carpet bomb French cities and fight one-on-one with Hitler's most feared soldiers.
German bodies, Canadian bodies, British bodies. That's war. One of the toughest battles in France was the Battle of Caen.